So Bitcoin is dumping and everybody's wondering why. Well, we're going to be looking at the brand new theory that came out yesterday that has an explanation for why the chart of Bitcoin looks like this. Everybody's wondering, is it BlackRock? Is it paper Bitcoin? Is it the old whales dumping their coins? We've got billionaires like Chamath Palihapitiya posting some really interesting videos about Bitcoin's 4-year cycle. But I think Jordi Visser actually has the best explanation for what is happening to the Bitcoin price. This is his Bitcoin IPO theory.
Don't have an IPO for Bitcoin, but this last 4 months to me feels like sourcing the pricing of the IPO, where the original investors are getting out of large chunks. Now, why is there ever an IPO? For monetization. If someone has 9 billion in Bitcoin, I think they should diversify a little bit.
So let's dive into, I'm going to play the rest of this clip in a moment of what Jordi's talking about, but let's explain what is an IPO. A lot of people will be listening. What the hell is that? This is an initial public offering. So Jordi wrote a really good Substack just over the weekend that's gone mega viral, where he looks at the largest IPOs in history, and you can see the title of his article here, Bitcoin's Silent IPO. Why this consolidation isn't what you think. Again, hat tip to Jordi. This is an incredible, article breakdown. It deserved a whole video, but he looked at these different examples in his article. He looked at Amazon in 1997. I've pulled up the chart of Amazon. I've tried my best to find some graphics that help to explain what Jordi's talking about in this article. But he says here, you can see Amazon went public in 1997 at $18 per share. Within 3 years, it hit $100, but then it spent 2 years going essentially nowhere, even as the internet bubble continued to grow. Why? Because early investors and employees were finally liquid. When the IPO moment happened, the initial public offering, and the stock went public, people who bought at $1 sold at $100. There was finally liquidity for what they were holding to sell. So again, there's a couple of more examples in this article that Jordi lays out, but let's just have a look at the Amazon example for a moment and how this could relate to Bitcoin. So you see the red line on the left-hand side of this chart. This is the Amazon IPO date. Happened in 1997, Amazon ripped, and then we saw this big red box. We saw a consolidation for somewhere around 6 months. We saw a little bit of a dump, and then Amazon went off to the races. Now we go back to Jordi's article here. He mentions another couple of examples. He talks about Google in 2004. It saw, again, 2 years of post-IPO consolidation. Facebook, same story again. We saw that pattern between 2012 and 2013, which is the little red box on the chart that I've got for you guys, I don't want to draw another one. The red box on the left-hand side of this chart shows what happened to Facebook just after its IPO, but then more importantly, what happened after the IPO distribution was over. Well, this takes us back to Jordi's thesis on Bitcoin. Actually, let's illustrate Jordi's thesis on Bitcoin, and let's show what this article is breaking down, because everybody's familiar with this chart here. This is the Bitcoin price chart, and everybody's kind of looking around at each other right now, and they're saying, hang on a minute, why is Bitcoin not in one of these big green boxes? We should be seeing an enormous bull run. We've always seen a bull run 8 months after a halving. But what's really interesting with Bitcoin is we've essentially gone sideways. We haven't really gone up in price for some time now. We can see Bitcoin's pretty much consolidated above $100,000 for what has felt like a lot longer than it actually is. But Bitcoin spent a couple of 100 days above 100,000. We first hit above 100,000 in November 2024. So what is this IPO movement when it comes to Bitcoin? I think it's BlackRock's launch of the Bitcoin ETF here. That's the vertical red line I've got on the chart. January 2024, BlackRock launched their Bitcoin ETF, we saw an aggressive rally. And like since November 2024, Bitcoin's gone sideways for a year. I mean, yes, we've dumped down to 72. We made it back up to 127 and we made a new all-time high. Again, it's still trending higher, but largely we've seen distribution with Bitcoin above 100,000. And Jordy's idea of this IPO moment, it's great, but it also aligns with what we've seen with the data recently. Bloomberg, they were writing articles recently saying BlackRock is pulling Bitcoin whales into Wall Street's orbit. Let's not forget what happened just recently. We saw 500,000 Bitcoin dumped by whales. Galaxy had that one sale of 80,000 coins, and everybody's trying to create a mental model. Why? Why is it happening? I think the IPO moment is the best explanation I've seen that really does articulate what is exactly happening with Bitcoin right now. Because Jordy makes another great point in this article I want to break down. We can see for years the liquidity simply didn't exist. Try selling $100 million of Bitcoin in 2015. You'd crater the price. Try selling $1 billion of Bitcoin in 2019. Same problem. The market couldn't absorb it. And this goes back to the thesis we've been talking about here on the channel for a long time. Bitcoin has fundamentally changed post 2020. We're in a completely new environment. And now Wall Street and the big whales and the billionaires, they are the ones who are driving the price of Bitcoin. It's no longer the retail plebs. It's no longer a thinly traded market. Bitcoin's matured. It's massive. It's huge. And again, this is the IPO theory. I think it's a great theory that explains what's going on with Bitcoin. But now, how long is it going to last? This is probably the question on a lot of people's minds. We can see Jordy says the timeline ahead. First, patience. IPO distribution periods typically last 6 to 18 months. Jordy says we're probably several months into this process, but likely not done. Also, Bitcoin moves on a faster time period than fiat assets. I think we are way past the 6 months in Bitcoin's time. So Jordy's kind of worded this to say and suggest that the IPO period could be done. We're 6 months into it by his words. It could be done. It could last another 6 months. But again, when we go back and we have a look at what happened to Amazon and Meta, I think they're good frameworks. They're good mental models to be aware of. But I think at the end of the day, nobody knows what's going to happen with Bitcoin. I think Jordy makes another interesting point in this article where we're talking about the drawdowns. So a lot of people right now, the biggest debate in Bitcoin right now is, are we about to see an enormous bear market? Is the bear market beginning? Is the 4-year cycle over? Jordy says the drawdowns, the 80% drawdowns that used to be routine may become 50% drawdowns. And the 50% drawdowns could become 30% drawdowns. Look, I typically agree with that, but again, take everything that anybody says with a grain of salt. I disagree that we're going to see lower volatility in the future of Bitcoin. And I actually do think we're going to see 10x rallies. So again, take all of this with a little bit of a grain of salt and think about, where you actually think Bitcoin is going. But I think the idea of this IPO moment, it's a really interesting one. And I think it's one that's not talked about enough because so many people, they're using outdated mental models. They're using the models that Chamath Palihapitiya recently talked about in this video.
So there's been a couple of halving cycles that have happened. And I asked him to go back and look at the price performance 1 month after a halving, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after a halving. And what you notice is that there are these moments initially where essentially when you go through a Bitcoin halving, people are sort of reassessing what's happening and they're trying to figure it out. That's sort of what I would say happens in the first month and roughly what also happens in the first 3 months. But then within 6 months to a year and 18 months of these things, there are these crazy price appreciation cycles that happen. So that's what this page shows, which is, 18 months after the first halving, the Bitcoin price returned 45x. After the second halving, it returned almost 28x. And after this third halving, it returned almost an 8x, which is really incredible returns in such a short period of time. If you go to the next page. And so if you graph that, this is what it starts to show, which is what is this price performance after each of these halving cycles. Now, why is that interesting? Well, it's interesting.
I think it's interesting because the Bitcoin bull run hasn't even begun. If you have a look at the price of Bitcoin, I believe Bitcoin actually hit a new all-time high before the halving in 2024. We got above $70,000 a coin. And right now we're back at 106. So Bitcoin's up 30% in the past 18 months after a halving. We've never seen this before. And again, there's a great comment here. I might dive into paper Bitcoin here in a moment because I'm not saying the IPO moment is the explanation for why price is not running. I think there's multiple different variables converging here. And I think there's multiple different likely outcomes. Again, I don't know what's happening. I'm not claiming to be a goddess of the data. And I have the data. I have the PhD in astrophysics. I know what's happening. I'm not claiming that. There's multiple different scenarios. I really like this IPO moment. Now, again, whether you believe in the IPO moment, whether you believe in the 4-year cycle or about to rip, again, I think the bull run is coming. I've got a ton of data that I want to show you guys of just why I think the next 6 to 12 months could be really bullish. Irrespective, I don't think we're going to see this, chop solidation for another 12 months. I think that's, in my books, it's pretty unlikely. And that's not only because of seasonality, but it's because of a lot of the other, things that we see under the surface. Again, Bitcoin's never consolidated at an all-time high for 200 days. Bitcoin's never consolidated this long. We've never seen such fear in the market with Bitcoin 12% away from an all-time high. We can see Bitcoin, there's never been more fear in the market over the past 7 months, since April this year, when Bitcoin dumped down to 58,000. The German government sold all of their Bitcoin, and a lot of people thought we're going much lower. All of the bears, like Gareth Soloway, came out and said, oh, $12,000 Bitcoin. They all came out of the woodwork, and they're doing the same thing now. Whenever you see a little correction in price, you always see perma bears come out and try to say that Bitcoin's going to zero. And I think this sentiment gauge is a really interesting one. It shows that, yes, Bitcoin's 106,000, like 15% off from all-time highs, but sentiment's horrific. It's bearish. And I just don't think you typically see that at a bull run. You typically see euphoria. People think we're going to the moon. Again, I think we're going to get there eventually. But again, who knows what time frame that's going to play out on. I've got some more data I want to have a look at in time frames in a moment, but let's talk about the most important thing. Again, if you are looking to get your hands on some Bitcoin, I think mining Bitcoin is the best way to do that. That's why I always tell you guys about my partner, Blockware Solutions. They allow you to buy the Bitcoin mining rigs yourself, or they have a hosted Bitcoin mining solution where they do all of the hard work for you. They plug in the miners. They go out there and they find the facilities with the cheapest electricity in the world. They've got facilities in Iowa, Texas, Georgia, Kentucky, and that is where your miners will be plugged into. Highly recommend you guys book a call with the link down below with the guys from Blockware and just learn more about mining and see whether it's the right fit for you. Because so many people say, oh, Luke, I'm trusting BlackRock with my Bitcoin. I've got $1 million of BlackRock IBIT Bitcoin ETF. Please don't do that. That's a terrible idea. Now, I did mention BlackRock. Let's talk about paper Bitcoin because there are some charts here I want to break down. That again, we're talking about multiple different scenarios here. I don't know whether, what's causing the price of Bitcoin to crash. I don't know whether it's Bitcoin whales selling their Bitcoin. Again, previously, what was the big narrative here? Who were the people who were most outspoken against the paper Bitcoin narrative? What did they say? They used to say, look at the chart of long-term holders selling their Bitcoin. They said, no. Coinbase, BlackRock, they can't be manipulating the price. They're too regulated. They're too big to be playing the same games that Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX all played. It's natural. We're just watching long-term holders sell their Bitcoin. And again, the chart backs up that Occam's razor response because by the data, it looks like, yes, long-term holders have been selling their Bitcoin since we got above $60,000 a coin. That's what the data shows. The data shows that this cycle is just like last cycle. And that was interesting until we saw these articles come out of Bloomberg recently. So what happened recently? BlackRock got its in-kind ETF passed. This happened about 2 months ago. What's happened in the past 2 months? Well, we've seen a massive sell-off by long-term holders. We've seen whales move a lot of Bitcoin. Now, when they move a lot of Bitcoin, on-chain, it leaves an on-chain footprint of a sell. It looks like a long-term holder is selling their Bitcoin. But what we found out recently was that $3 billion worth of Bitcoin moved into BlackRock's IBIT. And a lot of this was from long-term holders. So again, there's a lot of different perspectives, explanations, and theories as to what is going on with the Bitcoin price. This is a little bit more detail about what's going on with the price right now. When you zoom out, it does just kind of look like a little bit of a consolidation period before Bitcoin goes much higher. Look, charts like this that show there's max fear in the market make me incredibly bullish. And then we've got this chart here. This chart's kind of wild when you think about it. This is looking at long-term holders fumbling the ball. Now, again, if you don't want to fumble the ball, I always tell you, unless you hold Bitcoin in one of these, a hardware wallet, I don't think you own the Bitcoin. What's the first rule of Bitcoin? Not your keys, not your cheese. That's why I always encourage you guys to go get a hardware wallet today. This puppy here is the brand new Trezor Model 7 that they released recently. Again, I flew from South America to Europe just to be there for the launch of this product. It's a super slick hardware wallet. I recommend you guys check it out. Go get your hands on one. It's the first quantum-ready Bitcoin hardware wallets. Again, so many people are worried, what's going to happen with quantum computing? Is it going to take all the Bitcoin out of my wallet? I've always been skeptical of the narrative, but I do like wallets like this that kind of get ahead of the curve and say, hey, you know, if we see it, the Trezor Model 7 is prepared for it. So again, check out everything that Trezor's got. If you want even more options, Ledger is also making a ton of hardware wallets that, again, is super easy for you guys to use. Again, I've used all the hardware wallets in the space over the past 9 years. The reason I like Ledgers and Trezors is they're simply the easiest to use. Again, I've got a ton of hardware wallets, but the Ledgers and the Trezors, they're super easy to use. I've showed you guys the Ledger Flex, the Ledger Stacks in previous live streams. Maybe in 48 hours, I'll show you the brand new Ledger Nano 5th generation when I get home. I'm traveling over the next couple of days. So again, get your hands on a hardware wallet so that you're not trusting BlackRock. Too many people today in 2025 are trusting BlackRock. And again, I just think it's not the revolution. We shouldn't be trusting BlackRock or anybody. But again, like I said, let's have a look at this chart. Massive chunks of red here show long-term holders selling their Bitcoin. We saw massive distribution here in the beginning of 2025 when Bitcoin got up to above 100,000. Long-term holders sold a ton. Same thing when we got above the previous all-time high of 70K. Long-term holders sold a ton. We're now seeing the biggest dumping from long-term holders since those two events right now, as Bitcoin's chopping sideways at $100,000 a coin. Long-term holders have sold more than 400,000 coins over the past 30 days, representing nearly 2% of all of the supply. Now, again, this has come in the 8 weeks after BlackRock has rolled out their in-kind ETF redemptions. So some people are saying long-term holders dumped 400,000. Why is the price not dumped? Or maybe it's about to dump. Maybe we're about to see a 50% correction. Again, this idea of BlackRock pulling Bitcoin whales into Wall Street's orbit could be explaining maybe why the price is not acting like it did previously. Again, for 5 years, I've been screaming from the rooftops saying, do not trust these models. Bitcoin is evolving. It's 0.2% of global wealth. I think it's peak hubris to assume that you can predict Bitcoin. You know what it's going to do. Diminishing returns theory, the power law model. I know it's really unpopular to say that I'm skeptical of a model, that's predicting $1 million Bitcoin in the next 5 years. But I believe what I'm saying. I think a lot of people are going to get wrecked believing in and trusting in these models. That's why we keep it super simple on this channel. We only talk about the basics. We buy Bitcoin or we mine it somewhere where you can preserve your sovereignty. You put it into a hardware wallet. And then the next step, the very simple step, you put your 12 or 24 words, that's a backup of the Bitcoin in your hardware wallet, onto titanium. Again, there's a reason I've been partnered with StampSeed for nearly 2 years now. They create the best product in the Bitcoin metal space. They use titanium. Their kits are super simple and easy to use. You guys can get 15% off anything you want to buy from StampSeed with that promo code Luke15, LUKE15. Super easy to remember. They're an essential when it comes to your Bitcoin toolkit. And from there, you're sovereign. You don't have to trust a BlackRock. You don't have to trust all these institutions who are right now, let's just say, I think, making moves that might undermine the principles of why we all believe in Bitcoin. But again, I think the signal here, again, there's a lot of fear. Let's summarize this. I think the IPO moment, it's fascinating. I think it's a good mental framework that might explain why Bitcoin's chopped sideways for 12 months in what has supposed to be a bull run. It's a good theory. I'm not saying it's 100% the theory I'm putting all of my my cap on, so to say. I still think a lot of this chop solidation, it's being created by paper Bitcoin. It's being created by those who are trying to buy Bitcoin cheap before it rips. I think they've nearly accumulated the bags in size that they want to accumulate. And again, the reason why, sure, you can look at this theory of the IPO theory for Bitcoin. I just look at this chart and look at the quiet supply suffocation that's gone on for 3 years now. And look at how this trend is accelerating over the past 12 months. So I don't think whales are cashing out of Bitcoin. I don't think they're selling Bitcoin. I think a lot of them are moving their Bitcoin into BlackRock so that they can borrow against it or earn a yield on their Bitcoin or put it in a retirement account. I think personally, that's what I think's going on, because this trend's still accelerating. Someone's ripping Bitcoin off the exchanges. Nearly 1 million coins in the past 2 years have disappeared off the exchanges. If you look at the OTC desks as well. So again, I think that's the signal. I couldn't agree more with Mongman. Love that name. We're flushing out the longs before the big pump comes. And that big pump will come. I think Bitcoin's going to go parabolic much quicker than most people think, in a much more aggressive fashion. So that's the IPO theory for Bitcoin. I think it's fascinating. Another reason for why I'm bullish right now is because the attacks on Bitcoin and freedom are getting bigger and bigger. Yesterday, we did this live stream looking at Europe's admission that their CBDC, the euro, will have holding limits. They put out what was supposed to be an update for their digital currency. And in that update, I showed you guys, there was 41 mentions of the term holding limit. Paint me conspiratorial, but I think they're telling you the quiet parts out loud. Again, if you missed that live stream yesterday, there's going to be a link down below for you guys to go check it out. Things just got even worse in the EU, they did. So check that out if you missed it. I'm going to put another link to another video up on screen somewhere around there when we showed you how much Bitcoin you need to be in the top ranks of society. We ranked all the levels of Bitcoin wealth. And well, I said, I'm going to end this one here. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet because I've got to run. I'm about to miss a bus, so to say. And I'll see you all in the next one.